Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Hedge End, West End and Botley Local Area Committee. It's very good to see so many of you here this evening. Councillors are reminded that to take part in this meeting, you must have an open mind so that you can take all the relevant considerations presented to the meeting into account in reaching your decision. By attending today, you have decided that you will listen to all points of view expressed by the speakers and the public and are able to participate and cannot be seen to have predetermined any application. This meeting will be recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. If any members of the public prefer not to be recorded, then do please contact a member of staff. If you are planning on filming or recording the meeting, then please do let us know so that we can ensure you are not filming members of the public that do not wish to be filmed. The Chair reserves the right to ask any filming considered intrusive to be stopped. More information is available on the Council's website. We always welcome people to speak at the meeting, although this is a formal committee meeting of Eastleigh Borough Council and not a public meeting. The members of the public that have registered to speak will be invited to speak at the relevant agenda item and will be given a total of 3 minutes to speak. And while I mention about the 3 minutes, we do actually have a traffic light system here, so it indicates when your 3 minutes are coming to an end and when they've finished. People wishing to speak on an item on the agenda are able to do so before the debate starts. Once the debate has started, however, it is not possible to invite or receive comments from the floor. We want to be as inclusive as possible, but will not tolerate any disruptions to our meeting. Should there be any disruption, we do have the power under the Council's constitution to remove people from the meeting or continue in private, neither of which we take lightly, or we certainly don't wish to do so. Now, this agenda is quite lengthy, so we're looking at taking a break at the end of item 8, which is the last planning application, and before we commence on the TROs. So let's indeed start with that agenda then. So item 1, apologies. Nikki, any apologies, please?
We have apologies from Councillor Bearder and Councillor Tennant, and Cllr House is running late.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, item 2 is declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest they wish to make? If so, please indicate now, and when called, please state the nature and reason for the interest. You can, of course, declare any interests as they occur to you in the meeting. Thank you. Item 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of October 2022. And I'd like to sign those minutes of the meeting as a true record. Do I have a proposer, please? Cllr Corben, seconder. Cllr Gomer, thank you very much. All agreed? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, councillors. Right, item 4 then is public participation, and I believe we have one member of the public who wishes to speak at this juncture, and that is Mr. George Baker from Shafford Meadows. Mr. Baker, please.
Good evening. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Shafford Meadows Residents Association. My question relates to the ownership of the main access road that leads into Shafford Meadows development in Hedge End. When we purchased the properties on this development in June 2016, we were advised by the developer that the Residents Association will hold the responsibility for the estate management activities, including the maintenance and parking controls on the main access road. Recently, our estate managers have established that the land registry records for the majority of the access road had not been transferred to the developer, and as such, ownership has remained with Eastleigh Borough Council. So therefore, we believe that as matters stand, the Residents' Association have no responsibility for this section of the access road. So my question is, can EBC please clarify the ownership and associated responsibilities in this area? Please note, we raised this matter with EBC by email first in September 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker, and I am very well aware of the situation regarding the access road onto Shafford Meadows, and I believe you've had a communication from Kitty Budden, our local area manager. And Kitty, would you like to further update Mr. Baker? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The situation at this point hasn't changed beyond the letter that was sent in June last year. The Borough Council is responsible for, or is landowner of the access road. The residents have right of access across the road, and the responsibility for making good any damage caused remains with the individual properties and Linden Limited. At this point, we are still exploring options as to how to support the residents with regards to monitoring of the parking on the access road. I'm not aware of any parking issues ongoing. If there are issues with regards to parking, they can be reported via the council's website. But I'm more than happy to have a telephone conversation or meet with you, Mr. Baker, and we can discuss it further.
Can I respond to that? I haven't received that letter from you. I've received an email saying that the situation was complicated, but certainly none of the detail that you've just given. What you've just said to me is all new, and I haven't received the letter.
My apologies, Mr. Baker. It was sent to you by email. I will find the email and forward it on to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baker. Right, we'll now move on to item 5, which is the Chair's report. And that's me. Right, I'd like to welcome everyone to the first Hedge End, West End and Botley Local Area Committee meeting of 2023. Not only is this the first meeting of the year, but it's the first meeting at our new venue, the Berry Theatre. While every effort has been made to ensure the audience tonight can see and hear clearly and access the facilities easily, we would welcome feedback on how well you think the physical setup works tonight and any suggestions you may have for any improvements. Botley Park Community Buildings. It gives me great pleasure to say that on the 3rd of January, Botley Parish Council opened the Botley Park Community Centre and Sports Pavilion to the public. Following the transfer of the buildings from the developer to Eastleigh Borough Council, the Council and the Parish Council have worked closely together to ensure the buildings were ready for public use. The two buildings offer a range of classes and activities for residents and different sized spaces for the community to hire. For information regarding what's on or to inquire about hiring facilities, please contact Botley Parish Council. And I would just like to personally add my thanks, and probably the thanks of this committee, for all the work that our officers have done in getting to this end result of finally getting those buildings open. So thank you all very much for your participation. West End Heritage Markers. I'm pleased to say that the West End Heritage Marker public art project has now been completed, and the 3 attractive double-sided markers have been installed in different locations along the West End High Street. They illustrate some of the village's local history, celebrating notable people from West End, and have been well received by residents and visitors to the village centre. Maunsell Way Bridleway. Following the success of the Tollbar Way to Shamblehurst Lane Bridleway clearance by the Council's street scene team last year, the Council, in collaboration with Hampshire County Council, will be undertaking clearance of an additional section of Bridleway located to the east of Maunsell Way. The work is due to be completed before the beginning of March and will enable horse riders to use the bridleway safely. And many thanks to our street team as well. Thank you very much. Right, we'll now move on to item 6, which is the presentation on planning guidelines. And I'd like to invite Summer Sharp to give the presentation. Summer, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Firstly, I would like to set out the planning guidelines. Planning applications must be determined in accordance. Planning applications must be determined in accordance with the development plan unless other material considerations indicate otherwise. In this instance, the Eastleigh Borough Local Plan 2016 to 2036 forms the relevant the development plan. Other material considerations include the National Planning Policy Framework and the Council's adopted supplementary planning documents. Is that better? Other material considerations include planning history, appeal decisions, site-specific matters, consultee and third-party comments, and current case law. In terms of decision-making, members have requested the applications be heard at the committee, so therefore the decision-making lies with members of this committee. Decisions which are made contrary to officers' recommendations must be explained with clear reasoning. The application could be deferred for additional information or amendments, and clear reasoning would also be required for this. There is also the option for the committee to introduce further controls if considered reasonable in planning terms.
Thank you very much, Summer. Right, we will now move on to those planning applications. And the first planning application on item 7 is Unit 2 Strategic Park, Cameen Way, Hedge End. Summer, would you like to present your report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application proposes a change of use of the existing building comprising Unit 2. The description of development has been amended during the course of the application to include the B8 usage within the original part of the description, as it was noted there was some confusion. The planning history set out in paragraphs 9 to 22 of the committee report, specifically paragraph 22, shows permission was granted in the mid-1990s, allowing both Unit 1 and Unit 2 to operate unrestrictedly within B1 and B8 usages. The amended description was reconsulted upon, whereby the Parish Council responded with no further comments to make, and one number third-party comment was received, which reiterated the objection comments laid out within the committee report. The application site comprises a detached industrial building to the east of Comines Way and the south of Charles Watts Way. Unit 1 to the south is outlined in blue as the applicant owns this site, but the application site only relates to Unit 2, which is outlined in red. This is the aerial view of the site. The application proposes a change of use within the existing footprint of Unit 2. The existing uses comprise B1, which is research and development, and B8, storage and distribution. The proposed uses comprise EG, which is a use that can be carried out in residential area without detriment to its amenity, and that is basically a reclassification of the former B1 use. B2 is general industrial, and B8 is the storage and distribution. The first floor comprises of a mezzanine, and these are some internal photos. The application also proposes external alterations. On this southern elevation, you can see that there would be the addition of 5 new doors and also some solar panels, but these have been permitted as part of a separate application. Other external alterations comprise the removal of the 2 buildings outlined in orange. These are existing sprinkler, and the rectangular building is the existing cooling plant, which is now redundant, so they will be removed. The building outlined in green, as shown on this plan, is the new cooling unit, which would be surrounded by a metal palisade fencing, which would be approximately 2 meters in height. Other external alterations include a timber acoustic boundary fence to the southwestern boundary of the site. Some external site visit pictures. The main consideration of the application is whether the introduction of the B2 general industrial use and associated external alterations are appropriate for the building in this location. The introduction of B2 use is considered in accordance with policies. Local Highways Authority have raised no objection. Following conversations with environmental health, it was considered important to impose a condition which restricted noise levels. This is condition 3 of the decision. The external alterations are considered acceptable and in accordance with policies, and therefore the application has been recommended for approval.
Right, thank you very much, Summer. We do have one speaker who wishes to speak on this application, and I just have the name Natalie, who's a planning consultant, who should speak on behalf of the applicant. Natalie, thank you. If you could speak fairly closely to the microphone, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The proposals for Unit 2 form part of a wider programme of investment and refurbishment works. The current building is not flexible enough to respond to modern business needs, and the proposals seek to attract a wider pool of potential businesses. This includes the introduction of B2, general industrial and traditional manufacturing uses. To ensure the building attracts a desirable occupier, a number of adaptations to the building is proposed. This includes removing the extensive mezzanine floors that has been inserted to the main warehouse so it has sufficient head height. When the application was originally submitted, some residents actually raised some concerns. This was a result of the former occupier of Unit 1, not Unit 2. In light of this, we held a public consultation. This was primarily held to discuss the details of the proposals and also avoid some of the misconceptions that had arisen. The industrial estate was built in the late 1990s. The redevelopment was well received at the time, given the issues experienced by ad hoc commercial uses that had been long established here. The proposals included moving the access roadway away from the rear of West Road Gardens. The current permission enables the site to be used as a B8 storage and distribution facility and has very few controls. Unit 2 does benefit from the fact that it's enclosed by a larger warehouse unit at Unit 1 and the embankment of trees beyond that. Listening to residents, we have included a 3-metre-high acoustic fence in the corner to fully enclose the yard area. We have also provided loading door specifications. These have acoustic insulation and a twin roller system that ensures they're quiet when closing. The idea of additional loading doors and the dedicated bays means that activity will be concentrated inside the building rather than the yard area. An extensive review of traffic generation data throughout the 24-hour period has been carried out. This is a worst-case scenario based on much larger facilities elsewhere and did show that movements are likely to be reduced overall due to the reduction in upper floor area. Noise monitoring has also been carried out throughout the day and night to establish baseline conditions. Given its location next to the motorway and other strategic roads, it's not very quiet. The assessment made it clear that the broader uses can operate 5 decibels under the baseline condition. The Environmental Health Officer was therefore happy with the proposals and recommended the conditions set out in the officer's report. We have also provided a noise management plan. Measures include no amplified music, no tannoys, speed limits on the access road must be followed, signage reminding drivers to be quiet, ensure that engines are switched off when not in use, no shouting in the yard, and the use of broadband white noise reversing alarms wherever possible. Also to ensure that services are maintained in good order. After lengthy discussions with officers, the broader flexible use has been rigorously tested and it ensures that the broader uses will not have a negative impact on residents' amenity. I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Thank you for that. Do councillors have any questions on this? No? Okay then, right, in that case then, do I have a proposer for the substantive motion, please? Councillor Corben, seconder? Please, seconded. Councillor Pretty. Oh, sorry, I do apologise. I'm not used to have you sitting there, sorry. Right, is there any debate on this item, councillors, please? Councillor House.
Yeah, Just briefly, Chair. This was, I think some of the residents in West Road thought this was controversial to start with. And that's probably the reason it's even still here in front of us this evening rather than being delegated. I think with the benefit of the applicant actually explaining their proposals in more detail, some of us went on site and had a good opportunity to look at the site, look at a whole series of issues around the site, most of which actually aren't of concern to residents at all. I think we were reassured on those points. Clearly, it is really useful to get this site back into operational use. It can contribute to the local economy, but can do so in such a way which doesn't cause disturbance to neighbours. There's no reason why this application in front of us should cause any problem to any neighbours at all, so I'm happy to support it.
Thank you very much, Cllr House. Any other councillor wishes to speak on this? Yes, Cllr Kyrle.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the noise management plan, obviously, clearly we don't know who the tenant is going to be of this facility, and obviously that's going to obviously happen over time. What I would be concerned about with the management plan is making sure that we are monitoring that, because whoever the tenant might be, there might be ancillary equipment or whatever that might be starting to be stored or whatever in the yards or within the sort of confines of the yards, etc. And my concern would be is that, and from my personal experience, I know that some of that stuff can be incredibly loud and noisy when it's being moved and shunted around the place. So what I would not want to see is, albeit we've got baseline information, if you like, now, is what I wouldn't want to see is to see that slip over a period of time whenever the tenant does go in under that class use, and then decides that they're going to be using the external yard, etc., not just for vehicles, but for storing latent equipment or whatever, etc., that they might be using within their operation, which clearly could exceed the decibel level that's obviously being set out within the management plan. So I would like to see that obviously certainly monitored early on, if you like, just to make sure that they are complying with the with those rules.
Thank you very much, Cllr Kyrle. Anyone else? Cllr House. Could I... Councillors, if they could speak a bit closer to the microphone. I'm just conscious that people in the audience can't, although we can hear each other on stage, I'm conscious that maybe members of the audience can't hear us very well. So if you could speak a bit closer to the microphone, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I must admit, when I first saw the application, I was concerned that the noise effect on West Road, because we've had so many complaints of that in the past, and I've had a lot of conversations. But seeing the noise management strategy, I think, is reassuring. The acoustic fence is also reassuring. The only concern I have is that the onus is on the occupier to provide details of the operations. And as Councillor Kyrle said, we need confirmation who's going to monitor it and how often. I think so much in the past we've been quite happy to say this is a condition, you must monitor the noise level, and then we don't follow it through, and I think we have to be more robust. So that would be my only concern.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pretty. Did you want to come back on any of that, Summer? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The condition requires the applicant to submit the information, and then our environmental health team will review that as part of the discharge of condition process, if you like. And then the agreed measures need to be maintained through the lifetime of that specific occupier. It does only relate to the B2 usage, purely because the B1 and B8 can operate unrestrictedly on the site at the moment. Going forwards, the occupier would need to adhere to the measures agreed, and if any nearby occupiers felt that it wasn't, then that would be investigated separately.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I think we're all conscious about the residents in West Road, especially with the previous occupant of the other building, that they did suffer quite a lot from noise. And that any other councillor wishes to speak on this? No? Okay, then in that case, then I will ask. The recommendation is to permit subject to conditions. So, councillors, can I have a show of hands, please, of all those in favour? Yep, I think that's unanimous then. Thank you very much. Right, we'll now move on to item 8. Which is the planning application for Hilltop Pinewood Park, and then I'll ask Summer to present the report. Now, I understand we have quite a few people here regarding this application. So, Summer, could I just ask you, please, if you could speak a bit closer to the microphone so that, to make sure that the residents can hear. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Initially, I would like to start by clarifying the reason the application has been referred to committee. Councillors Craig, Jarvis and Manning of Basildon, Hamble and Hound Local Area Committee members have referred the application in agreement with the Executive Head of Planning and Economy due to the controversial nature of the proposals. The site is also located close to the boundaries of the two local areas. The application site comprises a detached dwelling and associated annex to the west of Canes Hill, the A27, and to the north of Pinewood Park. As you can see from this top picture here, this is the separate annex, which also forms part of the application site. The application proposes a change of use from dwelling house, which is classified as Class C3, to a residential care home, which is classified as C2, for 6 adults with learning disabilities and autistic spectrum disorder. There are internal alterations that are proposed, but there are no external alterations proposed to either the main house or the annex. These are some site photos, the existing dwelling on the left and the existing annex on the right. I'm hoping the floor plans you'll be able to see, but I'll run through. So the main dwelling will have some internal alterations at ground floor level. The reception room here will be converted into bedroom 5 with an ensuite. And as you can see, these rooms will be partitioned off to form separate dining room, kitchen and downstairs bathroom. And then these rooms remain largely similar to the existing floor plan. There are no changes to the floor plan at first floor level. In terms of the annex, there would also be internal alterations. As you can see from the ground floor plan, the lounge would be converted into a bedroom with an ensuite, and the existing 2 bedrooms at first floor level will then be converted into a medication room and an office. Here are the pictures from the site, which show the external amenity area. In terms of parking arrangements, there has been discussions with the local highways authority throughout the course of the planning application. This is the amended location plan, which the local highways authority are now agreeable with. There are 10 parking spaces, 9 of which are on the driveway and 1 which is in front of the annex. There are between 5 and 7 members of staff on site at any one time in the daytime and 4 overnight. This allows visitors to be able to park on the driveway and have sufficient space for staff and visitors. This is a photo of the driveway. There is also a cycle storage container proposed for 6 bicycles. This would be located to the north of the existing boundary treatment, fronting Pinewood Park. As you can see from the site visit pictures, the building will be located along here. The main consideration is whether the proposed change of use would have an adverse impact upon the character of the area or the neighbouring amenities. The proposals are considered to comply with the necessary planning policies and SPD and therefore have been recommended for approval.
Okay, Summer, thank you very much. Right, questions from councillors, please. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I've forgotten the audience, haven't I? Sorry about that. Very important part of this. I do apologise. Right, so we have several people who wish to speak on this application, and the first person who's registered to speak is Mr. John Hobden, who is objecting to the application. Mr. Hobden, if you'd like to come to the microphone.
Good evening, everybody. My comments are in addition to the points previously stated in the residents' notes against the application. The site at present resembles a prison camp with a huge floodlight on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, shining across the road onto and into our house. This is just one of the instances of lack of consideration for the residents. If it was allowed, no doubt obtrusive signage would be involved, spoiling the residential ambience of the road. I consider the application as extremely misleading in stating that the proposed use will be the same as for a residence occupied by a family. A family does not need 9+ designated car parking spaces and numerous staff changes day and night, with the added traffic of visitors and utility vehicles. This business, for that's what it is, it's a business, does not belong in a quiet residential road such as Pinewood Park and will ruin the peaceful nature of the current environment which has evolved over the last 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hobden. The next person registered to speak is Mr. Adrian Gray. Mr. Gray, please.
Good evening. Right, this application is to all intents and purposes identical to the application put in by Rhymacare in 2020. In substance, it is no different. That application was refused in 2020, and this application should be refused now. The residents that would be living at Hilltop would not be conclusive with paragraph 3 of your key points up there. These residents will be living in isolation. Pinewood Park, we all live there because it's quiet, it's out of the way. But the key to being able to live there is you have your own transport and you're able to drive, because you can get to everywhere then. But when you get back to Pinewood Park, you live in a peaceful road. Consider also, so we're all in favour of mental health and people on the autistic scale living in the community. I see them every day when I walk my dog at Hamble Country Park. But those people are living in the right area. They're where the amenities are. Furthermore, the original planning application for parking was an absolute joke. They've revised it. I agree it's much better. But there's no way that that will provide parking for everybody that will be either staying or visiting that establishment on a daily basis. So we ask that when the councillors here tonight vote on this application, please seriously consider whether it really is suitable for the people that would be living in that house, and the fact that the disturbance and parking to the residents that live there already would be totally unacceptable. But we don't see how you can vote in favour and how an application has even been recommended when it doesn't satisfy your own requirements for people living in care. They would be in the middle of nowhere. Thank you. Oh, sorry, finally, I submitted 4 questions. I would like those questions to be aired tonight and the answers given tonight before the vote is taken. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, I think we'll come back to that in a moment. Right, the next person who wishes to speak is Mr. Peter Small. Mr. Small. Thank you.
Good evening. Please forgive me if I get a little emotional, but this is my home, my life, my family being affected by a business moving in next door. A business that in the past 3 months of building activity skips 2 to 6 white vans daily has not had the courtesy of even knocking our door once, introducing themselves or explaining what might happen. We've had a taster of what might come with increased traffic, noise, and light, and the effect on our lives and lack of communication that is likely. It doesn't bode well for an ongoing relationship. And why should they care? It's not a family moving next door, it's a business. I wouldn't choose to buy a house next to this business, and neither would most other people. It will affect the value of my property, but much more important than that, it will affect our lives on a daily and nightly basis. 2 of the 6 proposed bedrooms, bedrooms 1 and 2, directly overlook our property, invading our privacy. In fact, they both look directly into our kitchen and will be able to see anyone in approximately half of our kitchen. These are bedrooms that will be occupied for most of those 24 hours. We feel a lack of privacy 24 hours a day. Is that right? Furthermore, bedroom 2 directly overlooks our rear patio, so our privacy is invaded outdoors as well as in. The annex is directly next door to our outside seating area, and the annex's garden is directly outside my garden office, both of which will give me serious concerns due to noise. To compare this proposal to a 6-person single-family dwelling is quite honestly ludicrous. A 6-person family don't stay in and around the property 24 hours a day, 7 days a week and 52 weeks of a year, and they certainly don't have 4 to 7 other adults with them all the time. A 6-person single-family dwelling doesn't need 9 parking spaces, particularly when 6 of them don't drive. This is a business. Pinewood Park comprises of 8 single-family dwellings. This proposal would transform one of the 8 single-family dwellings into a 24-hour business. That's 12.5% of the properties. Is that in keeping with the locality? Furthermore, I suggest that the application is contrary to the Council's principles regarding accommodation for those in need of care in respect of location, accessibility and integration within the community. The location of Hilltop is not a pedestrian-friendly environment to maintain mobility, retain independence, and does not provide easy accessibility to the community and local facilities. Pinewood Park is not within 400 metres walking distance of any shops, services, amenities or public transport. A walk to Thornhill, Hedge or Burston takes 40 to 60 minutes and involves walking along the busy A27. Furthermore, the pathway is only on one side of the road, relatively narrow and very close to the traffic. This application would place Rymercare's residents away from the community, not integrated within it. Its residents would be living in isolation, not in the community. It would negatively impact our lives living next door and those of other residents of Pinewood Park. Please protect my life, my livelihood and my family and reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Small. We now have Councillor Tonya Craig. Councillor Craig, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I felt the need to attend this meeting to mention a couple of things. Firstly, I feel this application is totally in the wrong place. This is a quiet residential area close to a busy 40-mile-an-hour road where there is data on a fatality. The nearest bus stop is 20-minute walk away using the A27 to Thornhill Park. That's me walking, and I'm quite a fast walker. Or 20 minutes to Tesco's in Providence Hill, crossing at Bursden Road or the very busy Windhover roundabout. There is no amenity area in close proximity, and during training at this site recently, we witnessed vehicles parking close to the junction of Canes Hill, having very little regard for the safety of residents of Pinewood Park and Dumbleton Close. If this is the kind of behaviour before planning permission is granted, I hold no faith should permission be given this evening. The report mentions public transport. It's non-existent. There is no public transport at all in and around the area. There's mention of the annex in this application. It was a garage conversion, and when I called this in, when I first noted this conversion, I was told that it was a family relative of the resident, and I was told that there were conditions on to protect this from becoming a permanent position. And now I find that it's in this application to become permanent, not only for residential, but now for a business. I think that the whole information in front of you tonight is wholly incorrect and should be dealt with properly. A site close to this application shows the issues that could actually happen once it's occupied. At this other site, within 200 metres, the staff park the entire length of the road, leaving nowhere for vehicles to pull in and pass. They leave their commercial bin on double yellow lines for up to a week, and it's regular basis. They also park their cars on these double yellow lines, weekends and evenings, and have done so during the day as well. 7 parking tickets on 7 different vehicles have not deterred them from doing so. Another care facility on Canes Hill has caused peace issues for the residents, where clients have been in the garden screaming and shouting. Due to their health issues, it's not their fault, but in a residential area, it is not acceptable. I'm sure the care company do a fantastic job, and in actual fact, their stats, if you go onto their website, put them in a really good place. But these facilities should be in the right place, and this is not one of them. I will call on councillors to reject this application this evening. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Craig, and many thanks to all the speakers this evening. Summer, would you like to come back on some of those issues that have been raised, please? Thank you.
Yep, I'll try. Firstly, I'll come back on the previous planning application. It was a lawful development certificate. So there is a difference between planning permission and a lawful development certificate. The lawful development certificate is assessed against a piece of legislation, which is the General Permitted Development Order, whereas planning applications are assessed on the Town and Country Planning Act of a different piece of legislation.
Some people are having trouble hearing, so if you could speak a little bit closer to the microphone.
Is this okay? Yeah. Okay, so the planning application and the lawful development certificate are assessed on different pieces of legislation. So I appreciate that the previous application was refused. However, that was because it didn't comply with permitted development, whereas this application is assessed against the local plan and the policies contained within it, which is why there is a difference in the recommendation. In terms of signage, that also is subject to specific legislation. Sometimes signage can be erected without any need for permission, but in other instances it may be required. So that is something that would be assessed separately again.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just add, regarding the annex accommodation, planning permission was granted for the residential use of the building and annex back in 2015, I believe, and condition 4 was placed on that permission so that the annex is used for purposes in conjunction with the existing dwelling. So effectively the annex, the garage building utilised as an annex in connection with the main house becomes one planning unit. Now the current proposal requires the change of use of that one planning unit to the care facility, the C2 use. So in actual fact the unit remains one, but the change of use involves both of those buildings. So that's just to clarify the annex situation. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, in that case then, councillors, have any questions regarding this application, please? Yes, Cllr Kyrle.
I know you've explained it to us, but I have to say I find that very confusing, frankly, to be honest, between the different legislations, which clearly then seem to send the proposal in a different direction. It just seems quite confusing to me. I've been doing this for a number of years, and even now I'm learning more and more about the planning system, which I find all seems to be very sort of, and I don't mean this in a funny way, but smoke and mirrors sometimes, to be honest with you, and I don't mean that in a funny way. It's just the fact that how, if I don't understand it, how members of the public are supposed to be able to make head or tail about how something is able to be sort of, as it were, proposals or whatever are able to be changed between one legislation and another. I find that very sort of strange, if you know what I mean, and I can understand why residents get quite concerned when they're trying to find their way through the process.
I don't disagree, Councillor, in terms of planning legislation. It is complex. To try and simplify it, the lawful development certificate effectively was the question, do I need planning permission? It was answered, yes, you do. It was refused based upon the information submitted. So, do I need planning permission for this change of use? Yes, I do. Therefore, that application was refused. And then this application is, well, as I need planning permission, can I have planning permission? So it's almost like a two-stage process. Do I need it? Yes. Can I have it? Well, it's up for recommendation today or this evening for debate. So it's effectively a two-stage process, if that helps.
Can I just ask a further question? I see that it's mentioned in the report about a cycle container. I've not heard of one of those before. Clearly, obviously, shows my perhaps I'm in a different age now. I don't know, but I was just wondering: is that a thing, or is it just a container that's got wooden cladding on the outside of it? Because it does say container, and I'm just wondering why it's not a cycle store like the normal ones you see. A container to me sounds like something that's come off the docks, and then someone's going to clad it with wood on the outside of it. If that's the case, then clearly I would have concerns about a container. When clearly you can buy things that are far more ergonomic or whatever, and probably maybe more natural as well within that setting.
Yeah, so I assume that the words container and any sort of other outbuilding could be interchangeable in this instance. It is literally just a storage area building for bicycles.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from councillors before we move into debate? Yes, Councillor House.
Yeah, just one question from me. Oh, sorry, I should speak into this loudly and project. We're in a theatre, aren't we? Is this site in the urban edge or is it in the countryside?
The application is in the countryside.
Thank you.
Councillor House, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Kinloch.
I note that the CCG hasn't given any comment or put anything. Is that still the case?
Yeah, no comments have been received from them.
Yes, Councillor Welsh.
I think we all agree that these provisions for these people are required, but I do not think that this is the correct area to put them in. It is in a residential area, and when we're talking about adults, these adults can start at 16, and we've had quite a few of these care homes or homes providing for the youngsters, the teenagers, etc., within Hedge End. And although sometimes they're very quiet, in the summer months, they're in the gardens, they're in the streets, and they do cause quite a problem. So I am a bit concerned that this isn't the right area for this to take place. So that's my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Oh, goodness, yes. Questions then. Cllr Corben.
Sorry, I'll try not to move into debate, but the reason for the question is I'll echo everything that Councillor Welsh has just said, in as much as this type of facility is important and it needs to be somewhere. The question we're looking at, and that's a much wider question, the question we're looking at tonight is whether this is the right place. And I just wonder, when we look at our policy specifically regarding access to public transport, how do we assess that? Because I struggle. It's a subjective view. I'm assuming, but when you overlay the fact that these are individuals that need assistance. Walking 15 minutes or 20 minutes if you're a speed walker like Tonya, that is going to be a challenge, I think, and I just think just on that basis, this just doesn't feel quite right to me. But I don't want to go too far into debate. So I just wonder how do we assess the proximity to public transport and for people to be able to use it and actually to be in the community, because that's kind of the idea of what we're talking about here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good question. I'd say it is a material planning consideration in terms of, is the site in an accessible location close to, amenities that the occupiers will use and need. One of the tests of accessibility and sustainability is, and it's in the SPD for care homes or housing the elderly and for care. And one of the criteria is that it should be within 400 metres of a bus stop. Now, we've done some research in terms of how close the nearest bus stop. There's several bus stops around the area, and I think the nearest is 600 metres. So it's as sort of came out in some of the deputation, that is obviously further than your 400 metres, but it's not necessarily a definitive answer, because you've got to weigh that up with other material considerations such as the need for the accommodation, the fact that it's an existing domestic dwelling, and you could potentially change the use of that dwelling to a care facility without planning permission. The fact is that in this case it does need it, therefore we are assessing it. But the accessibility is one factor in the bigger picture, and it's an important factor. So it's which is why we've pointed out in the report and why we're debating it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask a quick question on the back of that? You say about the distance. What about the frequency of the service? Do you look at that as well? Or?
Absolutely, yeah, that's a big factor as well. So how is it used? If it's once a day, then it's not particularly useful for sort of regular use, but if it's more than that, then it's going to be used more often.
Thank you. Councillor Pretty. Excuse me, no, sorry. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Pretty.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that facilities such as this are an essential need for those that have difficulties in autism. My concern and my question to you would be this 400-metre walk to the nearest bus stop. It seems a little. I went over there yesterday to have a little reconnoitre, and I was concerned on a Sunday. The A27 was still very busy. We're expecting these people that have difficulties, both with learning and autism, to be able to cross it. The A27, walk left and right, left towards Thornhill, right towards Hedge Village, and do we consider that safe? I personally think that although I'm a great supporter of the idea and the facility, I don't think this one's in the right place. It feels wrong that they have to go along such a busy A road to get to the bus stop, and I just question how that can be justified.
Much, Councillor Pretty. Right. Did you want to come back on that? Are you okay?
I just wanted to say, yes, there is a footpath or pavement along the A27. I know it's busy, a very busy road, but there is a pavement that the pedestrians, it's there for pedestrians to use. I think Summer also wanted to come back. We've had a comment from the applicant regarding sustainability and the use of public transport.
Yep, thank you. So the agent has advised that whilst they would encourage occupiers to use public transport, there is also a company car, if you will, that would be able to take occupiers wherever needed as and when. So it's not solely reliant on public transport. There are opportunities for them to be taken around by private car.
Yes, Cllr Kinloch. And before we Cllr Kinloch, can I just ask members of the audience, please, to not interrupt the councillors or the officers when they're speaking. We were very quiet when you were speaking, so please, thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, two questions. One about the bus stop usage and how frequently the nearest bus stops are used, because I think that is important, because you said it's a material consideration, but we haven't actually touched it. I don't know, to be fair. And the second question is about disabled access, because I'm assuming some of these care people will need relatively high care needs, including potentially wheelchair. There's going to be some ground floor surfacing. And again, I've walked up down the A27, I've run down it. And I'd just be interested to know how much of the sort of high care wheelchair users access would we know about, would we plan for, and is the footpath down the side of that and the crossing places on the A27 suitable to get a wheelchair? So two questions, one about bus stop frequency use and one about accessibility for wheelchair.
Thank you, Chair. We'll respond on the frequency. I believe it's every hour for the nearby bus stops. And in terms of wheelchair use, I think I may need to defer to the applicant to be able to advise further on that, because I'm not aware of any mobility issues as such for occupiers. The description is as written on the report, so I'm not aware of anything that could be a mobility issue as such.
Sorry, Chair. And just for the accessibility-wise of the footpaths along the A27, is that suitable for wheelchair use?
To be honest, I don't know the answer to that. I've seen some photographs of the pavement. It looks suitable. I don't know it's full width. So I'm unable to answer that question fully.
Okay, I understand from my colleagues here that that is, although it's very important, it's not a material consideration. Is that right, what I'm saying, or not?
Well, the application isn't for a disabled care home, so it's not necessarily a material planning consideration for this application.
Thank you very much. Well, if there are no more questions then, councillors, we will now move into debate. So can I have a proposer, please? Cllr Corben, seconder. Cllr Asman, thank you. Right, councillors, we are now in debate. So, yes, Cllr Kyrle.
Chairman, can I just have clarification? What did we actually propose? Because were we proposing to permit, or we just, I mean, I know you're after a proposal to go into.
We are not proposing anything at the moment until we go to a vote. This is to go into debate.
You just want to go into
debate. Chair, we've been through this before. The council has no standing orders suggesting we have to have a vote as to whether we go into debate. We go into debate as soon as questions are finished. We've been through this before. You've been given bad advice. Apologies.
I don't want to get in a discussion about this at the moment, but for my colleagues here, this is how it's proposed that we do it. Apparently every other meeting does the same apart from one. So thank you.
That's nonsense, but never mind.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor House. Always grateful for your opinion. Right. Any debate? Yes, Cllr Kyrle.
Sorry, I have a gap in the table here, and I just nearly disappeared down it. Some councillors would probably be quite happy if I did disappear down it. Probably, to be honest with you, maybe never to come back again. I don't know. Dear me, it's put a light mood on this, hasn't it? I'm really quite concerned about this, and the more I actually hear about this, the more sort of detail we go into, I actually get even more and more concerned about it. And I do appreciate that potentially we wouldn't necessarily have seen this kind of application come in where you can obviously change residential use obviously into these sorts of facilities without planning permission. But I am quite concerned. I'm certainly concerned about the sustainability element of it, and I do appreciate obviously there is the answer that we can use private cars to drive people around, etc. I am concerned potentially about what the age group of these individuals will be, and clearly some have more complex needs, obviously clearly depending on the spectrum issues than maybe others. Obviously the age elements, etc., can come into it, obviously depending if there were people who are slightly older, they may not be quite as active potentially as people who are slightly younger, etc. And therefore their needs will obviously change within that. And clearly within that, you then need to be able to cater for those different needs and those different issues that would present with those particular people. And given the fact that it's residential, you would suspect potentially, and I don't know this for sure, that therefore their needs probably are quite complex, I would suggest. And clearly we do need to have these kinds of facilities around. And obviously, if you are looking at residential properties that need to have certain numbers of bedrooms, etc., they tend to be relatively large dwellings. And therefore, the location of those tend to be in less high density areas within our community, but clearly this also is deemed as being in the countryside. The A27 I think is quite an issue for me in the close proximity to the property, and I do think it therefore gives, just by definition, an isolating element to accessibility to the wider community, or even the near community. And I've thought long and hard about this, but I can't see, given also the debate and the answers we've had back from the questions, etc., that we've raised this evening, how I can support this. I'm not quite sure what the reasons are for refusal. Certainly sustainability, albeit that I appreciate it's a material consideration, but maybe not something that's really weighty enough. But I just don't think that this is the right place for this. And I do think there are concerns potentially that ought to be looked into, albeit that they may not be falling in the remit of this application, where there are clearly some difficulties, I think, on site. So I don't think I can support this as it stands at the moment, I'm afraid, Chair. So I would be happy to propose that we refuse.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kyrle. Cllr House.
Yes, thanks very much, Chair. I had concerns before today, and funnily enough, the concerns I had before today have been resolved. I was concerned that this application might be linked with the former criminal owner of this site, and it turns out it's not, which is really good news. The criminal owner has moved on and sold the site, and I had concerns of whether the applicant knew what they were doing. Well, clearly the applicant does know what they're doing. They've got a great CQC record. I checked out one of their other sites in Southampton. However, the concerns that have been raised today during the course of this meeting, I think are actually far more concerning than the concerns I had before today. I think we've been given very bad advice this evening. This proposal does not accord with the Council's SPD for accommodation for older people and those in need of care. Now, I know planning is a subjective issue. Planning is an art, not a science, but it is very clear on even a basic reading of the Council's SPD that this application does not conform with the SPD. And it fails to conform in two very significant areas. The SPD, by the way, was a groundbreaking document when it was written. Quite a few years ago now, 2011 it was published. It was largely written on the basis of some research that was carried out by a former Labour councillor of this authority, who did a lot of work on issues around older people and their needs, and a very good piece of work, and the SPD resulted from that. But firstly, the SPD says very clearly that outside of the urban edge, the presumption is for refusal of this kind of application. Inside the urban edge, the presumption is in favour. That's very quite clear in the SPD, and it doesn't take rocket science to read it. But more fundamentally, some of the reasons for that are about proximity to facilities. And this application fails both 4.23 and 4.24 of the SPD, and I can't see how anybody could read it suggesting that it doesn't fail to meet the tests in the SPD. I'm going to read those two paragraphs because they're important, and it's important that this council and this committee is given factual information rather than factual information covered up because it's not convenient. 4.23 says, it is important that residents have adequate services and facilities to cater for their needs. Remember the client group we're talking about here. Residents should not have to leave their local area to access essential services such as GP surgery health centre, general food store, post office, pharmacy, bank. 4.24 says, the local area should also provide opportunities for residents to integrate with the local community, thus improving their quality of life. Such facilities include community facilities, public open spaces, places of worship, libraries, and leisure facilities. And paragraph 4.25 then goes on to say, the council considers that all of these essential services and facilities, the word is all in the SPD, should be within 400 metres of the development, brackets an easy walking distance, or be accessible by a bus route with a stop within 400 metres of the development. That paragraph is specific. It is not conditional, it says will. This application does not meet that test. Now, it's been argued that there is a bus stop, I think it suggested 600 metres away. And there is a bus stop in Holcroft Road, off of Hinkler Road, which you can access if you take the narrow cut through from Keynes Road on a gravel track down to Hinkler Road. You can do that. But it's a useless bus service. So it doesn't objectively meet the test of public transport being accessible to get to that list of things we're told have to be available to these residents who we all agree need to be integrated in a local community because they matter. They're not people who get left over and dumped in the countryside away from anywhere. They're important people who deserve quality services. And we are told, again, they should have access to a GP surgery, a general food store, a post office, a pharmacy, a bank, a community facility, a public open space, a place of worship, a library, and a leisure facility, all within 400 metres or easily accessible from a 400-metre bus stop. None of those facilities are available from this location, other than Dumbleton Copse, which is the 10 or 12 or 14 houses at the bottom of Pinewood Park. This is the least accessible site in Hedge End or West End for this kind of facility, unless you go into the far north of Allington Lane. So, a matter objectively, quite clearly, this fails to meet the test of the SPD. Now, I've looked at where the most accessible bus stop is, with a decent bus service. And there is a decent bus service. There is a decent bus service up at Moorhill Gardens. It's the main route in and out of Southampton, where a lot of the buses from the Hedge End area go. Great, terrific. I was told earlier today that that bus stop is 0.7 miles away from this location. Well, I've checked on Google Maps for the walking distance from this address in Pinewood Park to the bus stop in Moorhill Gardens. It is 1.44 kilometres. Not 400 metres, 1,040 metres more than the SPD says it should be available for. So this application fails to meet those tests in our SPD. I'm going to move refusal of this application simply because it doesn't meet our own policies, Chair.
Right, thank you very much, Councillor House. Any other councillor wishes to speak on this? Okay, well, my concerns are very similar to what Councillor House has said, probably not as detailed as what he's mentioned, but the main consideration is the fact that how remote this is. I mean, we all appreciate care in the community for all residents, and that, as Councillor House has said, everyone should have the right to access all the facilities that are available, no matter what your circumstances are. So I would actually, concur with what Councillor House has said. So, councillors, the recommendation in front of you then is to permit. So,
Recommendation is to refuse.
oh, sorry, I didn't hear you, Rupert. Sorry.
Yeah.
Difficult over here trying to hear some of you over there. Sorry, sorry. Okay. Much. So the recommendation, Councillor Kyrle, seconded by Councillor House, is to refuse this application. So, can I have a vote, please, on the recommendation to refuse this application, please? Could I have a show of hands? Right, I think that's unanimous then. Okay, well, the reasons I think are pretty clear, as what Cllr House has actually set out regarding the SPD 4.3 and 4.2 being remote and not accessible to all essential services. Sorry.
4.22 and 4.23.
Thank you very much.
Qualified by 4.25.
Thank you very much.
Along with the urban edge issue.
Okay,
as well.
That's great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Everyone okay with that? Yeah? Yeah, right. Okay, I did say at the beginning. Oh.
Can I just apologise for disrupting the meeting, but this is one of those sites where it couldn't possibly be allowed to get through, and it's kind of quite annoying when you know the ins and outs of the area, and you've spoken to residents, and it's very clear. So it's just a bit of passion that comes out when you're talking on behalf of residents. You know the area well, so apologies for interrupting.
Very much, Councillor Craig. I do appreciate that emotions and obviously are running quite high because this is your home and this is where you live. So thank you very much for that. As I said at the beginning of the meeting, I would call a short break at the end of this item, and I thank you very much for coming along. If you don't wish to stay, that's absolutely fine, but you're very welcome to if you wish. Okay, thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Andy Pledge. I'm going to run through the proposals for the traffic regulation orders in the local area. Various roads have been investigated in response to reported problems such as obstructed parking. Site investigations were undertaken to assess the issues being experienced by road users and to decide on the appropriate measures to mitigate the issues. This report details the comments received during the public consultation period. The committee is asked to consider the comments received before making a decision to introduce, amend, or withdraw the traffic regulation order. "24 representations were received to these proposals. And I have a list of these to run through. The first proposal was for waiting restrictions to be placed in Allington Lane. The proposals were to extend the existing double yellow lines, no waiting at any time restrictions, from the vicinity of the access to the country park northwards, eastwards towards to cover the existing residential properties further along Allington Lane as far as the mobile home park. These proposals were put together because of road safety issues in connection with cars parking on the road and on the footway, affecting other road users. We had one resident of Allington Lane supporting the proposals, and we had a further resident of Allington Lane objecting to the proposals on the grounds of increased speed and loss of customer parking and deliveries for his business. It should be noted that loading and unloading is still permitted on double lines. However, customer parking would need to be accommodated within the private curtilage of the business, as parking in Allington Lane at this location is a serious road safety issue for other road users, including pedestrians. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've just looked at
Allington
Lane. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or anything on Allington Lane? No, we don't have anybody registered to speak on it at the moment. No? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The The next proposal was for double lines in Damon Close. This follows concerns from one resident of Damon Close regarding obstruction to his property, access to his private property. Three representations we received from Damon Close, one non-resident and 2 residents from the same household were in support of the proposals. And they cited concerns regarding regular obstruction to their private vehicle access. 4 local residents, 2 from the same household, objected to the proposals, and the concerns they expressed included loss of parking for elderly residents, visitors, and subsequent relocation of parking causing obstruction elsewhere in Damon Close. The comments received was that there were no parking problems and the proposals were unnecessary, and it was stated that this is more of a neighbour dispute than anything else. It is accepted that obstruction to one private driveway parking area can be caused by inconsiderate parking. However, the property in question has more than one driveway access and additional parking space for vehicles is available. The current proposals are likely to affect visitor parking to other properties by reducing curbside parking space. That's the end of that.
Andy, we do actually have a gentleman registered to speak on this one. Mr. Ron Burlingham. He's gone. Okay, thank you very much. Right, in that case then, we'll move on to the next one. Or unless councillors have any questions or comments on this one. No? Oh, okay then, thank you.
The next proposal was for a junction protection markings, again double lines, at the junction of Howe Road with Eden Road. No representations were received from the consultation on this proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, is anyone? No? Okay. Move on.
Okay. The next proposal was for an extension of the existing double lines at the junction of High Street, Broadoak with Holmesland Lane. The double lines are proposed to be extended up to the footpath further along Holmesland Lane, and again, no representations have been received for these proposals.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anyone registered to speak on it. Any councillor? Yes, Cllr Kyrle.
Thank you very much, Chair. Sorry, it was only just to say that I very much welcome this, and this has been, I think, a bane of residents' lives for a period of time, actually, where, unfortunately, a local nearby main car dealer staff that were supposed to have been actually able to be parking on their site, which was supposed to be a condition of a planning permission not so long back, because I actually got that planning condition put in. And they were causing a lot of chaos and mayhem for residents living in Cobbett Way, because that's where they were parking their vehicles during the day, which stopped elderly residents from parking. They've now decided they're going to start parking their cars on the entrance to Holmesland Lane, right onto the corner. And they're actually, to be honest, I'm not saying it's necessarily them today, but I was there today delivering some leaflets, and it was pretty well parking all the way up from the junction again, which means obviously traffic trying to get in or out of Holmesland Lane onto the high street is then meeting traffic on the wrong side of the road when it's trying to do so, which is actually really quite dangerous. So I'm very pleased to see this recommendation for TRO here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cllr Kyrle. Andy, thank you.
The next proposal is for some proposed no waiting, restricted between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. and 2:30 to 4 p.m. Monday to Friday, to deal with issues regarding school children accessing Tamrisk Road from a footpath and walking through along towards the junction with Jasmine Road. We had one representation from a resident of Jasmine Road who objected to the proposals due to concerns regarding displaced parking further into Jasmine Road from the Tamarisk Road junction. The proposals in Jasmine Road are on one side. There was a request for further weighting restrictions to deal with that problem. However, requests for further weighting restrictions are outside the scope of this report and would need to be investigated for possible inclusion in a future scheme by Hampshire County Council. Delivery of traffic management services will be reverting to Hampshire County Council after the agency agreement with the Borough Council ends on the 31st of March. We had one other representation from a resident in Tamarisk Road who was objecting to the proposals which ran past their property, and they were requesting to have access protection lining for the access to their property rather than the single yellow line banning parking at school times. Access protection markings can be provided as an alternative to the restrictions across the two driveways to this property, as it will mean for the majority of the time there won't be any parking on the access protection line except by the residents, which would be at other times to school times. That's the end of the one.
Thank you very much, Andy. Any comments or questions on that one, councillors? I have to say that parking for at school times is particularly bad, and as a committee we've tried a lot to try and negate that parking with restrictions and certain times on the roads around there. So we will continue to do so, of course, until the service is taken back by Hampshire County Council. Thank you.
Perhaps I should just add that we can still have the traffic order for the single yellow line running through the entire length of the proposal, but we could omit the single yellow line and put in access protection lines if we want to. And if we subsequently find that they are an issue, then we can revert to the single yellow lines.
Okay, there are some houses already along there, and in one of, I can't remember the name of the road now, something Gardens off of there, that do have the H-bar, the access protection lines in front of their driveway. So I think on this occasion, if we could do the same so it's consistent, I think it would be a good idea. I don't know how other councillors feel about that. Thank you.
No, I would. It was working fine before. I don't know. I would agree. I think from a consistency perspective, but also given that the representations that have been received is not necessarily against the fact that there are issues about school parking, but issues about access or whatever to their, or protecting access to be able to park outside of those times. So instead of, shall we say, affecting everyone's amenity, but by giving those H-bar markings, it might then mean that we've got a happy compromise there. So I think, and also the consistent approach as well. So I'd agree with that. But as you say, if you then monitor that and find that you then need to revert back to the yellow line, then clearly that could be something that could be looked at as well. So.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kyrle. Yes, if we could include that on the traffic regulation order, that would be great. Thank you very much.
The next proposal is for a very small extension of the existing WLA line in Littlewood Gardens, and this is merely to protect the private access to a development that has taken place off of the Littlewood Gardens spur. So this is really just to make sure that there's no parking across that access, and we've had no representations to this proposal.
Thank you very much, and I don't have anyone registered to speak. I don't know if anyone has any questions or comments on this one. No? No? Okay, we'll move on then, Andy. Thank you.
Okay, the next proposal is to implement WLA lines within Lyons Place. There are already WLA lines at the junction of Lyons Place with Upper St Helens Road, and they extend a little further into Lyons Place than would normally be required for a junction protection. The proposal is to extend the WLO line on the northeastern side of Lyons Place up to and around the curve, and also to place WLO lines on the other side of the road around the curve. This really results because we have problems with refuse vehicle collection, and miscollections have resulted because of parked cars parked on the footway and in the carriageway. We had 2 residents in Lyons Place supporting these proposals. We also had 7 residents in Lyons Place objecting to the proposals, citing that there's already a dearth of parking in Lyons Place, resulting from insufficient parking allocation per dwelling. There would also be a loss of parking for a disabled relative adjacent to their property. And the proposals would possibly lead to relocated parking on nearby main roads to the detriment of road safety. There is an exemption that already exists for disabled parking to take place temporarily on waiting restrictions, provided they're not causing obstruction. Alternatively, an application for a disabled bay could be made by the residents in need of this facility, and we could deal with this independently of the traffic regulation order. As I stated, the proposals relate from difficulties for refuse collection vehicles that are unable to manoeuvre satisfactorily due to the indiscriminate and obstructive parking by residents, leading to miscollections. I don't know if you want to.
Thank you very much, Andy. And we do have actually a gentleman registered to speak on this one. Mr. Nadir, thank you.
Evening, everybody. Apologies if my formatting isn't correct. It's my first time attending. Just to raise a concern around the parking on Lyons Place. That's a pretty congested area. You'll notice 4 of the buildings are actually flats. They're not single-home dwellings. So just on that one road, you've got about, I think it's about 10 to 15 flats. At bare minimum, they've allowed for a single parking space per home, which inadvertently allows or encourages, enforces about 10 to 15 people to park their cars on the road. Over the last 2 years, we've had double yellows placed on Upper St. Helens, so that's where a lot of the overflow was. The double yellows extend from the top almost 3/4 way to the bottom of the road, which means any alternative for parking near your home is about a 10-minute walk. And if you're a parent with a child or with someone elderly, it is difficult. To be brutally honest, and I think it's just a question more for advice than anything else, it is a difficult problem to solve. I think there's been 1 or 2 requests to add double yellows or extend double yellows over the last 4 years that I've lived in the property. And I don't think it's going to solve the problem. If anything, it'll make worse and raise tensions across with neighbours as well. I do know that on one of the responses there was a recommendation for free parking permits, which might actually be helpful just to ensure that residents of the street are allowed to park. We do have, often is the case, people who are looking to use Upper St. Helens actually spill over into Lyons Place to park, so that it adds to the problem, makes it worse. I appreciate it's not an easy one to fix, but it's one that requires careful navigation, if that makes sense. So yeah, recommendation from the residents is to reject. While we appreciate that it does make refuse collection difficult, that is largely down to 1 or 2 inconsiderate drivers. Sorry, I was going to suggest that maybe a retest on their licenses was needed. But yeah, it's to a large extent, most of the neighbors are pretty careful when parking. The key one is on the 2 pins as you enter the street, where we have people park on either side or on the one side, which prevents a bin truck, in fact even a large trolley, lorry from getting through on most sides. Thank you very much for hearing me out.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nadir. Councillor Corben.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is an interesting one. The first impression is that there's not much of Lyons Place left for people to park in, and I just think we're just moving a problem is my concern, and particularly around the bend. I think people are just going to move further down and in. I'm not sure this is improving the ability of the people living there to park. They're extremely restricted. So my gut feeling here is that this is probably a step too far. That doesn't help from a refuse collection point of view. I don't know what we can do. We have smaller vehicles that can go and collect. I don't know if that's possible if there are cars parked there, but we might need to be a bit more ambitious with this. I think just sticking yellow lines down just feels to me as if we're making a problem worse rather than improving it, whereas everything else I've seen, we're improving. I'm not sure this particular is. It's a very tight road and a very tight turnings, and I don't know about the number of car spaces that have been allocated, but this doesn't feel quite right to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Cllr Corben. Cllr House.
Basically agree with Ian and the gentleman who spoke. There is very limited parking in Lyons Place. The flats all do have parking spaces, which you can get to through courtyards. But of course, they're pretty tight, small spaces, and residents don't use them all the time. And that's inevitable. We see this with these kind of schemes. And it was designed with a lower parking standard than we would normally permit. So I think we do have to think very carefully about the balance here. It feels to me as though the balance is somewhere between nothing and what's here. And that the immediate corners, or the bits that really do matter in terms of turning circle for refuse vehicles, might be the way forward, but not the length that is shown there. It just feels that it's just too long, given the very limited parking there is in Lyons Place, to really meet that need. Now, I don't know if that helps Andy in terms of finding a way forward, but something which was kind of like about half of the blue lineage that's here now, closest to the corners, feels like a better balance to me.
Thank you, Cllr Kyrle.
Someone's trying to tell me something. Some of the councillors down there, probably. I agree with all the comments that have been made, and without wanting to go over them, I remember when this application came forward, I have to say, I think I probably raised concerns about parking standards because I think they were at a lower level. I think it might have been the government at the time that reduced the parking standard levels, and I think we saw a number of planning applications across, certainly in our HEWEB area, where I was concerned about the parking standards per dwelling, and clearly this has come home to roost. This has been a difficult issue that's we've been nibbling away at for a period of time. And has obviously had issues that have spilled over onto other roads where we've also had to react in effect by putting in TROs. And my concern about putting more in here is that it will just exacerbate the problem even further. And so it is a really difficult one. I think our officers are trying to respond to what they have with the tools that they have, but obviously that may not necessarily be able to give us the answer that we want and the residents also want as well. Clearly we want to be able to empty people's bins. We do need to have access to be able to do so, and clearly that causes all sorts of problems from an operational perspective if we're not able to do so in a timely manner. And clearly, obviously, people then complain about the fact that they've not had their bins collected. Albeit I totally understand that when you live there, you obviously want to be able to park near your property, etc. as well, because obviously you want to be able to do that. So it's trying to find that happy balance, if you like, or trying to find the balance. And I would agree that I think potentially, and this is no reflection on the work that's been put in by our officers, who are obviously trying to respond to all these issues and strike that balance, that clearly I think that we've got to be careful that we don't tip that balance too far the other way. And I think possibly what's being proposed, albeit that it may resolve the issue for the bin lorries, may tip it the other way with regards to amenity for residents who are having to obviously live with the fact that the parking standards, in my view, probably were at the time of the planning application and probably still are now, is the fact that the parking standards are pretty woeful when you're looking at properties where clearly people in a one-bedroom, two-bedroom flat are probably going to have more than one vehicle, and maybe more than that potentially, and therefore nowhere for them to allocate it to be able to park. So I would suggest that the corners are protected and that we remove the big swathes, and we just try and continue to monitor. And maybe if it does go past the March deadline where it goes to the county, it will be their responsibility, and I'm not trying to shove it down the road. We have looked at this over a period of time, over many years. I think we've looked at doing things in this particular location, and maybe we're just not going to be able to crack it this evening, but protecting the corners, clearly, I think that is very important, but certainly not having the extent there, which at least will give residents some amenity space to be able to park their vehicles, and hopefully it won't be too difficult for them to be able to continue living there in a good way.
Councillor Corben.
So I was just going to say, if we are going to protect the corners, can we protect as little of the corner as we have to? Because I think that's too long actually going around the corners. I think the really minimum bit that we need to do so that the lorries can move around if that's what we want to do. But probably need to have a really good look at the corners if that's what we're going to look at. Thank you.
Yeah, I know this has been an ongoing problem in Lyons Place, and I know all the members can remember the issues with Upper St Helens and pushing cars out into Upper St Helens or Lower St Helens is obviously going to create more problems there again, which we don't want. And it is difficult, Mr Nadir, obviously living there, as you say, if you have children or whatever, or elderly relatives, disabled relatives, it must be difficult. I would say that this is probably, I know you've put lots of work into this and we really appreciate what you've done, but probably, as just been suggested, just protecting the corners and getting rid of that long swathe, because otherwise, you know, where will the residents be able to park? As mentioned before, the lower standards when this development was put in regarding parking, obviously it's caused an issue because I believe the flats only have one parking space where you've got a 2-bedroom flat, or even a 1-bedroom flat where you've got more than one person living there. So I think a suggestion to get rid of the long swathe and protect the corners is a good one. If we can go with that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we always, in our mind's eye, when we look at proposed TROs, we're very aware that we can never extend the proposals once they're advertised, but we can always lessen them a little. So sometimes when we look at a problem like this, we look at what we'd like to achieve in terms of the refuse vehicle. I mean, the 10-metre refuse vehicle length, and with their swept path, we try and identify how much of the curb needs to be cleared from parking. I think we could still probably accommodate refuse vehicles by reducing the restrictions. I mean, when we went to the site, we did see that there was indiscriminate parking at the junction with the spur of Lyons Way, which may or may not be causing problems for residents, but that wasn't really specific to the refuse vehicle. So we might be able to modify the proposals to perhaps 10 metres in each direction on each side of the road from the tangent point of that curve. So that would probably be about the minimum we could do to ensure that the refuse vehicles could still negotiate that curve.
I think that sounds quite reasonable, actually. Yes, if we could do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr Nadir, for coming along and speaking this evening. Thank you.
The next proposal we have is at the end of Miles Road, junction with Marvin Way. There are 2 existing parking bays at the end of Miles Road, which actually obstruct turning of vehicles at this point. So the proposal would be to remove those parking bays, they're time-limited parking bays, and to actually place WLO lines around that cul-de-sac to enable people to be able to manoeuvre and then turn. We had one resident in Miles Road supporting the proposals, and we had a resident in Marvin Way objecting to the proposals, requesting additional restrictions in Marvin Way to deal with any relocated parking. The problem we have, as you know, is that requests for further weighting restrictions, they are outside the scope of this report because we cannot extend restrictions once we've advertised, although in the normal course of events we would perhaps defer it and look to extend and then come back to committee. But obviously with the end of the agency agreement in March, we don't have that opportunity. So it could be investigated for possible inclusion for a future scheme by Hampshire County Council, as they will be taking back the traffic management services after the 31st of March.
Thank you very much, Andy. I don't know if anybody registered to speak, but Cllr Kyrle.
Someone's got a jammer somewhere, haven't they? Which is jamming the signal. This has been a sort of quite a long-standing issue that's been going on and off for a period of time, where you have, unfortunately, another one, an independent car company, not exclusively, but certainly the main problem, where they're parking their sale vehicles permanently in those parking spaces, even though they are only a timed parking base. But of course, trying to get enforcement there, etc., is obviously quite difficult as well. And the residents really just sort of had enough of it, frankly. And obviously, this has been sort of relatively low priority for the committee, obviously, over a period of time, but obviously certainly something that's been on the list for a while. So I'm very pleased that these will be removed, because in fact, really, actually, albeit that those parking spaces were put in, it is actually a turning head, really, to be perfectly honest with you. And actually, we did put WO lines all the way along Marvin Road Way and into the turning head, which is just slightly off the map. So you have WO lines all the way along one side and in the turning head, which we did because obviously that was to prevent cars from parking in the turning head at the other end, because you can't get through, and therefore people couldn't turn round. And that was actually to protect people from being able to get in and out of their driveways, because people were parking inconsiderately on the other side of Marvin Way, and it is quite a narrow road. So we actually did respond to residents' concerns at that point. I do appreciate that they believe, or whoever it was believed, that there would be displaced parking from those parking bays into Marvin Way. But at the end of the day, that already happens now anyway, because of the issues with this car sales place. This won't necessarily resolve it. I don't think it will cause even more problems than it already has, already is. So I think, again, we are responding to residents' concerns in the whole by removing these timed parking bays and double yellow lining them up so that it can be accessible and used for all, which is not the case at the moment, unfortunately. So I'm very happy with the recommendation.
Thank you very much, Cllr Kyrle. Thank you.
Thank you. The next proposal is for WO lines, no waiting restrictions any time in Rommel Close. There's been quite a bit of indiscriminate parking in this turning area, and you can see that there is a cycle footway coming from one of the ends of the turning area, which has been obstructed by vehicles, and so affecting road users wishing to use the pedestrian footway and combined cycleway. We did get, whilst it wasn't a formal objection initially, we did get a resident in Rommel Close who requested a freedom of information request regarding the survey work undertaken for this proposal, and the resident wished to see the response prior to considering making a full objection to the proposals. It was also remarked that the area of Rommel Close that we were intending to put the waiting restrictions on may not be public highway. The freedom of information request was responded to by us on the 22nd of December, and we felt that any objection resulting from that information could be received prior to the meeting and right up to the meeting to be presented to the committee. With regard to the land ownership, this is Rommel Close, and as part of the adoption of the roads and footways on this estate, the extension of the cul-de-sac at this point was adopted as part of public highway. So we are clear that all of this turning area where we're proposing the at any time markings is public highway. Just to add that TROs can be created on land that isn't public highway, provided we have the landowner's permission. So that wouldn't necessarily have been a problem, but it was part of the request, so we did try and find out that information. I think that's all we have on that, but I believe we have someone here to speak.
Thank you very much. Yes, we do have a gentleman registered to speak on this, and this is Mr. Roy Russell. Mr. Russell, please. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak on this matter. I've lived in Romwell Close for the last 25 years. As my wife reminds me, she's been there for the last 37 years, so I had to be upstage there slightly. Romwell Close is actually a national speed limit cul-de-sac. It has never been deregulated down to a normal speed. It is consisting of 14 dwellings ranging from 2-bedroom cottages to 5-bedroom houses. But only 5 of those dwellings have off-road parking, and most of those is only for one vehicle. The proposed TRO will have a massive impact on residents and visitors. I have supplied a copy of the council approved plans for Mill Gardens, which clearly showed at the top end of Romwell Close, it was actually designed at this time when these plans were put in to actually be parking bays for the use of residents of Romwell Close. It was correct, I was unable to put a formal objection in writing. You heard what time the Freedom of Information came through, and it didn't allow me a written response, and that time it said it was closed. The Freedom of Information response confirmed that you've actually had no complaints about the parking in Romwell Close or vehicles having problems turning at the end. We have LPG gas deliveries because we have no mains gas, and one of our residents uses oil, and we have tankers come down that road and have no problems in turning. It did say in the response to the Freedom of Information request that in October the council received a request to have no parking markings put on the road at the end of the cul-de-sac to enable vehicles to turn and to keep the pathway clear. It didn't state where that request came from, and that never came in as part of the thing. It also stated that the local area committee was asked to consider Romwell Close as a priority site for 22-23, and it said that the councillors agreed to that above, and the issue, because parking in the turning area, the reasons given were, leaves no spaces for vehicles, including refuge vehicles, to turn. Like I said before, no formal complaint has ever been received by the council. Causes access problems to cyclists to the cycleway. I'm afraid Mr. Pledge is incorrect. That is not a cycleway. The reason people assume it's a cycleway is because the contractors who built Mill Gardens put the wrong barriers in, put the wrong bollards in. The bollards show that it is, but it's never ever been adopted as a cycle route in. Where would they be cycling from? There's nowhere down there. Subsequent to the ordering, subsequent to October 2024, there have been 4 local area committee meetings in November, March, June and October. I went through the minutes and I can't see any point where you were consulted. The other, I'm sorry, I know I've gone red, but the other part is mention of the bin lorries. The reason that the bin lorry is now struggling to get down the road at all is because they've changed the lorry. Instead of using the small wagon, which they always have used in the past, they're now using a bigger lorry. And it's never got stuck down the road, so I can't see how it's caused any problems. In conclusion, I humbly submit that the proper process hasn't been followed. Eastleigh Council has not received any complaints, and it would have a massive impact on the residents of Romwell Close should you approve this TRO. Sorry for going over, and thank you for listening to me.
Much, Mr. Russell. Any councillors wish to make? Yes, Councillor Gomer.
Thank you. So just to clarify on that one, was the refuse lorry issue raised by direct services?
Yes, we've had miscollections, and so that was raised. It was also something that was a councillor request to look at this matter as well.
Okay. So I can see some argument for trying to keep the I can call it the left-hand bit, just so we're all clear of vehicles, but I'm very mindful that there is quite limited parking down there. It's gone. Could the restriction be reduced a little to allow that parking to continue on the right-hand side, or would that make the scheme pointless?
The issue with the obstruction to the footway, cycleway, as it's signed, and it really doesn't matter. Obstruction, that is a dropped curb at the end of that path. So parking there is already an offence on the dropped curb. So we were simply trying to make it easier to enforce.
Yeah, so if we were to maintain double yellows on that side, but not there, would that be a...
Yes, we have. This is a slightly overlong turning area. And I think even with the refuse vehicle, we could perhaps look at reducing the amount of restrictions on the north-east spur to try and help with residents' parking.
I think, to my mind, that would be a better balance of the competing concerns on that site. Chair, in terms of process, are we proposing amendments now, or are we going to wait till debate?
What we'll do at the end, when we go to vote, we'll vote on the recommendations, including all the amendments that we've proposed.
Yeah, but when are we proposing them?
Well, we've just mentioned a few now. I mean, if you wanted to propose one now, that's absolutely fine.
Well, I'll propose that one now then.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy to second that.
The gentleman mentioned about not following the right process. I think I should say that as far as the officers are concerned, we have followed the correct process for this traffic regulation order.
Thank you very much, Andy, for confirmation of that. Right, okay, let's move on to the next one then. And giving Cllr Gomer's recommendation to actually amend that one, if we can include that as well. Thank you.
Okay, the next proposal is for a pair of streets, Trent Way and Severn Way. And the proposal is to completely place double yellow lines through the entire length of those two roads. This follows concerns raised over several years by some of the residents about the impact that any parking has in these narrow sections, and the impact that can have on their access, particularly the potential for emergency services due to poorly parked vehicles in the narrow sections of the road. I should add that some of these concerns related to match days at the nearby Aegeus Bowl. As many traffic issues around this area do, but they are no means exclusive to them, which is why we were consulting on a permanent restriction. We had 3 local residents, 2 from the same household, objecting to the proposals for Severn Way and Trent Way. One of these was received after the consultation period had ended, but we felt that it should be included for a committee to consider. This was on the grounds that they didn't see a current parking problem. Concerns regarding the effect on local residents and vehicles and carers and displaced parking to other roads where there are already problems. I think in the comments received, there was a reference to the fact that many of the residents in these roads are elderly, and so the carers parking in particular did seem to be an issue. That's it. Yep.
Thank you very much, Andy. And we have Julie Barney registered to speak on this one. Thank you.
Hello, good evening everybody. Thank you for listening to me. Yes, I would like to object to the proposed double yellow lines in Severn Way. in particular, because it's a small cul-de-sac, 15 bungalows, mainly elderly residents who do rely on visiting family, hairdressers, carers, gardeners, etc. And they do value the right to be able to park outside their own homes. There's never been a problem with refuse collection, deliveries, or anything else. And we do all tend to speak to each other, so if there is an issue, we resolve it ourselves. We know who's parking there. It's only occasional that cars are parked there for visitors, but I think if you were to take that away from us, it will just force everybody visiting us to park on St James's Road. And there is already an issue there, especially opposite the end of Hope Road, with parked cars on both sides of the roads, and then obviously traffic trying to get through. So I think there doesn't really seem to be any necessity to put these restrictions in place, and I do think you would be causing inconvenience for the residents. I think that was everything. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes. Councillor Gomer.
Thank you. So I think we need to consider them somewhat separately. So Seven Way, I completely agree. I don't think we should put any restrictions there. There seems to be no clamour for it off the back of the consultation. I don't think it's solving a real problem, so I think we leave that one alone. Trentway, I think, is more difficult. It is incredibly narrow. You can't park a car on most of Trentway without obstructing either the carriageway or the pavement or both. And there are some occasional problems with lack of access, made worse on match days with the Aegeus Bowl. I know that's been mentioned, but not solely related to it. So I would certainly support restrictions on that throat up to the end. I think the question then is what restrictions we would want on what I suppose is the turning circle over on the left. My worry is that if you were to displace that parking that shouldn't really be happening on the throat up to the end, there's actually no places there you could really get a car without blocking someone's driveway. So given that the road is pretty much all unsuitable for parking, that the houses do have driveways, and that there is a little bit of scope for the occasional visitor to park on St James's if need be, assuming that the driveways were completely full, I think it would be worth lining the turning circle just to protect it, to save creating a new problem. That's my feeling. I'm open to suggestions, but I suppose the amendment I'm proposing is that we drop Seven Way completely, but that we keep Trent as shown.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gomer. So just to confirm that Seven Way, you're saying no restrictions at all, and then on Trent Way, restrictions at the turning circle at the end.
No, restrictions as shown.
As shown, right, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. So if we could include those, please. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The next proposal is for Upper New Road. This is to place WL lines, no way to get any time restrictions, from the mini roundabout junction with West End Road to the south, all the way along to the junction with September Close, which already has junction protection markings. This is really a road safety issue because there is quite a curve, and the outside of the curve does suffer from vehicles parking, which means that anyone travelling north has to pull out onto the wrong side of the road to travel along quite a considerable length without knowing what's coming south because of the visibility around the curve. So the intention was to improve road safety by clearing the whole section on the western side of Upper New Road. And we've had no representations to this proposal.
Thank you very much. Any councillor with a comment? Yes, Councillor House.
Not just him. I just can't see that on most of this stretch there's a problem. It's a little bit narrow at the northern end, but the end from not far down from the... I mean, I agree that the bit on the roundabout, you shouldn't park there anyway. But further down, that is used for routine car parking as a matter of routine, and I've not seen it cause a problem there. I don't know if Richard has, but...
I broadly concur that it's a relatively slow stretch of road because you come off the mini roundabout, you're coming down a hill, it's not a great bend, so it is narrow. You have to stop and let cars through, but it doesn't feel dangerous to me. What I'm more worried about is that we know we have parking issues on some of the closes off of Upper New Road, and I worry that we would make them worse, where I think there is probably more of a genuine safety concern. That one I'm not convinced on.
Can I briefly come back, Chair? I think that the section immediately by the bungalows there, is it 43, 41, 39, 37? The road is a bit narrow at that point, but it's not particularly a problem really. So I'd be inclined to just delete this. Actually.
The forward visibility around that curve is problematical in part because on the eastern side of the road there's a substantial amount of overgrown vegetation, and it would help if that could be cleared as part of the work we do. Certainly that would be a help, but it doesn't really solve the problem of vehicles being on the wrong side of the road.
Cut the grass.
I'm sorry?
Cut the grass.
I'm sure we could speak to our officers at Direct Services and ask them to cut back the vegetation. So basically, so we make it clear to Andy and Tony, what is the proposal? Is to leave it as it is, or just do the corners?
I would drop all of it. I mean, you wouldn't park on a mini roundabout anyway unless you were particularly hard of thinking.
It's actually worse than that because it's not even a proper mini roundabout. There's a rumble strip on that corner, so you'd be utterly barking mad to do that.
Okay. Well, we know we have people who drive their vehicles and don't care where they park them, whether they park them on corners or whatever. We do have people like that. But if you are okay, if you want that one removed totally, yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I would just add that one man's rumble strip is another man's parking place. Thank you. The final proposal was to look at the junctions of Watson Court with Hindmarch Crescent. Again, we have quite a few problems with refuse collection and missed deliveries have occurred for Watson Court because of the inability of the vehicles to turn in. Is quite a narrow road for them to turn in anyway. We had one resident so these are proposals for W lines at the junctions to protect the junction and also to allow refuse vehicles to turn in and out. We had one resident of Hindmarch Crescent objecting to the proposals on the grounds that this will exacerbate their current lack of parking provision and cause relocation of parking adjacent to other areas which will also be obstructive or unsafe due to the nature and layout of the development. The resident requests a much more comprehensive proposal to mitigate this. As I've said, the advertised proposals were intended to remove parking from the two junctions to accommodate refuse vehicles collections as they are unable to manoeuvre satisfactorily. So we concentrated on that particular issue. And whilst the further proposals would be outside of this report, the situation could be monitored to assess a need for further restrictions following implementation. This would need to be investigated for possible inclusion in a future scheme by Hampshire County Council, as they will be carrying out traffic management services, but we could at least put that forward for them to consider.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Anyone wish to speak on this one? Councillor Kyrle.
Thank you, Chair. So I was just waiting for the microphone to go off. This is another one of these schemes which, do you know what, I wish I'd taken some bets out with one one of those betting companies many years ago when we looked at this planning application, because I knew this would come back. I mean, the point is that we had this fad at the time, I don't think we probably still have it actually, about these garage courts that are put in, which are nowhere near people's properties, and you know exactly what's going to happen. They're all going to be parking outside the front of their houses, which is where people want to park. But we don't do that. We create these strange architectural things where you have to drive underneath somebody's house to get to a poorly lit, no connection to the properties where they actually relate to. So you have to walk your children or your babies and your shopping and everything else to your front door or your back door or whatever. And then we end up, as the local authority, coming back in relatively short order, actually, because Hindmarsh and round there is not that old, really, in relative terms, where we end up with issues of people parking on the corners and the people parking opposite the roads, and therefore we have access issues and bin collection lorry issues and everything else. And so we have to, as a local authority, then clear up the mess afterwards. So I'm not surprised we're seeing this, and I think we have done some other things in there over the past, I think. But it is particularly difficult. I've delivered in there over a number of years. I know I don't do it now, but I have. And Watson Court, albeit that actually looks quite nice when you're walking through it, you can clearly see that when everyone's at home, it is actually quite difficult from a parking perspective and access as well. I think it's actually quite a nice little development, really, to be honest with you, but I just think the parking's bonkers, and I'm sure I said so at the time. And I still maintain the view of that, because people are parking all over the pavements. You know, I have to walk in the road more time than I actually walk on the pavements, because you actually can't walk on the pavements. So anyone who's in a wheelchair or got a pushchair, they've got no chance whatsoever. From this perspective, I understand that potentially residents may want to see a more comprehensive package come forward. However, I think we have to be very careful. This is another one of these sites. We have to be really careful, because actually it's again about that tipping point and that balance. And I think protecting those corners will protect the access, if you like, for vehicles, manoeuvring, etc. If we did too much more at this point, I think we would end up causing more harm from an amenity perspective than potentially we might want to look at. So I'm happy with those, but it's not my ward. Other members may wish to have comment on it.
Thank you, Councillor Kyrle. Councillor House?
Well, of all the formal housing schemes in the borough, this is the one I think that works best. It's a very rare thing, a formal housing scheme that works well. Sorry, there's no one here from Formal Homes, are there? No. But this one works pretty well. And it's even at a reasonable density. And there are very few parking courts, actually, Rupert. I mean, there's a parking court next to numbers 21 and 23, Hindmarsh Crescent, that serves the 8 houses there. And there's a small one behind the block of flats 1 to 11. But most people have got parking either within their curtilage or on the street. And there's 1 or 2 garages, not very many garages, probably too many garages still, because garages aren't used for cars, are they? They're used for rubbish. Stuff. I think this scheme works pretty well. And I'm not generally a fan of putting more parking restrictions in to here, because I think that it will just cause more displacement and more difficulty for the existing residents. I think there is clearly an issue about people who are dumb enough to park bang on a corner, and both entrances to Watson Court do tick that box. But these lines, again, just feel a bit too long for me. I think that if we look at number 53 at the bottom of the screen, if that line was the same length as the line immediately below it, next to 120, for example, and likewise at the top of the screen, if the lines next to number 1 and 2 were the same length as the terrace between numbers 78 and whatever it is, 70, that feels like it'd be a bit more proportionate. It would still get the refuse vehicles round, and given that's the real reason we're doing it, it's not because parking causes a nuisance, particularly in Hindmarsh Crescent, because it really doesn't. The scheme works. So I think those slightly more modest proposals on those junctions would do what we want them to do, without actually causing residents more inconvenience by stopping them parking where they can quite legitimately park, at least some of the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor House. And I agree, parking is around there can be an issue. As Councillor Kyrle mentions, you know, you do sometimes have to walk out in the road, but I would just comment also, I know it's not to do with it is roundabout to do with the TRO, the fact that a condition was put on that development that garages could not be converted into living accommodation, and we have had some planning applications where the officer has said yes, that's fine, they can be, but I think, you know, they should really look at that and look at the parking around there and maybe uphold that condition. So thank you. And yes, I would agree with Councillor House on his suggestion, reducing the length of the line. Andy, thank you.
Yeah, we could possibly go to the very minimum of 5 metres in each direction for the junctions, just to see whether that makes it's difficult. These are narrow roads, so the refuse vehicle is having to, although the lines have increased in length, that's because the amount of carriageway actually needs to turn in a narrower road. But it would probably help them if the lines were at least 5 metres in each direction, give them something to work with. I'm sorry, that's the last proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. In your, I just wanted to ask about, on your recommendation number 2, about remove waiting and parking restrictions in West Road. What does that actually refer to in West Road?
Yes, there were a number of minor removals of lines which are to do with a previous traffic regulation order where we ended up marking the sites as the committee wanted us to. We then had to legalise those because you shouldn't leave a traffic regulation order saying that the lines go here and they don't, because what might happen is a subsequent maintenance scheme where the road is resurfaced, you might end up with the lines going in incorrectly. So we just go back and make it so that the lines on site are backed up by a legal order, and that means revoking short sections, which is what we've done.
Thank you. I just wanted confirmation of that, because when I saw that, I thought, my goodness, we've only just put them in.
No, they've actually gone in as they should, and yeah. it's the legal process
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's obviously to do with the others as well that are listed too.
All of those are related to that previous.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I think we've exhausted all of those now. So just to make things official, can I have a proposer, please, for the recommendation, including all the amendments? Councillor Kyrle. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor House. And all those in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, and thank you very much, Andy and Tony, for all the work you've put into these traffic regulation orders. I know we had quite a shopping list, didn't we? Great, thank you very much. Right, we'll now move on to item 10, which is the Community Grants Report. And I'm going to ask Kitty Budden, our local area manager, to introduce the report. And may I just thank the members of the public for coming along this evening and speaking. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the Community Grants Report, there is actually an amended recommendation for this. Councillors should have a piece of A4 paper in front of them that provides the amended recommendation and an explanation of why it's before you tonight. The report in paragraph 8 talks about there being excess grant funding available. We had a reduced number of grants this year to what we would normally see, so there's quite a substantial amount of grant funding still available. And during the Community Grants panel meeting, it was discussed, rather than retaining that money for next year and carrying it on, to actually look at how we can use that money this coming financial year to deliver additional benefits for local residents to meet their needs. At the meeting, we talked about focusing on either our young people or our elderly residents. Subsequent to that meeting, Siobhan Strand and myself spoke with our health and wellbeing specialist at the council, who has experience at delivering projects for both of these groups of residents, to see what possible projects there were coming up that we could, as a committee, support. I will keep it brief. when we considered what projects there were for our young people and the grant funding that the team already had available for those projects, we felt it was more appropriate to focus on our elderly residents, particularly because the Borough of Eastleigh has the highest rate of falls in Hampshire, and the area around Botley has one of the highest fall rates in the borough. So the suggestion and the recommendation before councillors tonight is that £11,000 of grant funding is allocated to increase the hours of a health works officer by 5.5 hours per week for 2 years. In doing so, that time would be spent in the HeWeb area to deliver additional community classes. These are the strong and steady classes to support our elderly residents and those in need of additional care to remain strong, to reduce their risk of falls. Additional benefits are promotes independent living and reduces social isolation and loneliness. So the funding would go towards those additional classes. It would also enable additional support for health walks in the area. So the amended recommendation before members tonight is that the committee approves the grants as set out in Appendix 1 to the main report, and approves the allocation of £11,000 to the Council's Health and Wellbeing team to secure additional health works provision in the HeWeb area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kitty. Does any councillor have any questions on the community grants or the amendment? Yes, Councillor Kinloch.
A couple of questions. I'm slightly disappointed in the lack of grant applications, and I didn't know whether there's a particular reason in that process, because actually there are a lot of good groups giving a lot of good things, so we need to have a look at that. But equally, the strong and steady sessions and the health works and the stuff for the elderly people, elderly and more immobile is a great preventative thing to put in. So I think actually we should be, I support the recommendation to put money into that way, because actually a lot of the community grants support the young in our population, and actually if we can keep people at home, keep people more mobile and independent, that is only good for them, and a good way of doing it is through that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kinloch. Any other? Yes, Councillor Gomer.
A question first. This is funding for 2 years, but just to check, I completely understand this is a one-off payment this year that covers 2 years. We're not committed to funding again next year. Thank you. And then otherwise, just to echo Councillor Kinloch's comments, it's a bit of a shame that we're not getting the applications in, but obviously the grant panel can only deal with the applications that come in. I would like us to change tack on it a bit, I think, and really think about how we use this money to increase inclusion. I'm mindful of those families who maybe can't afford clubs, but would like to go to one, and rather than putting on sort of new provision, necessarily, I would like to see us, for example, creating free places in clubs, things like that. But I think we just need to have a proper sit down and think about how it works next year, because clearly this sort of completely open grant process doesn't seem to be capturing people's imaginations, and I wonder if it's just too much admin for too little reward. But no, otherwise fine.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gomer. I agree with both of you. The fact that we did have very little, well, very few, I should say, applications for grant funding this time. I mean, we have this money available, and we really want to help those organisations and people in need who need that funding. But on this occasion, I know we spoke about the family fun days at Itchen Valley Country Park for families on low incomes to enjoy the day out there, but the health and wellbeing team, as you can see, are confident that they have secured that grant funding for the project this year. So we obviously wish to support residents from both ends of the spectrum, from the very young to the elderly. And given really what's happening with the NHS at the moment, if we can keep people out of a bed in hospital and keep them at home and well, then I think that's probably a good idea. So in that case, councillors, can I ask for a proposer, please, for this amended recommendation? Yes, Councillor Kyrle, thank you. Seconder? Oh, sorry, I haven't seen Councillor Gomer, thank you. Right, all those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried then, thank you. Right, we'll now move on to item 11 then, which is the financial management report. And again, I'll ask Kitty to introduce the report. Thank you, Kitty.
Thank you, Chair. The report before members relates to the potential changes to fees and charges at Itchen Valley Country Park and Hedge End Station Car Park for the coming financial year. As members are aware, these are devolved facilities to the committee, hence why the report is before you tonight. The recommendation is that the committee approves the stated fees and charges for Itchen Valley Country Park for 2023 and the stated fees and charges for Hedge End Station Car Park for 2023. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kitty. Any questions from members on the report? No? Okay then. In that case then, do I have a proposer, please, for the recommendation as stated in the financial management report, please? Thank you, Cllr Pretty. Seconded, Cllr Kyrle. All those in favour? It's unanimous then. Thank you very much. Item 12 is just planning appeals, and I would ask councillors that we just note those appeals. Thank you. So this concludes our meeting. So I would just like to take the opportunity to thank you all for coming, especially the members of the public. I know some have left, but the others are still here. Thank you very much. And our next meeting is scheduled to be held on Monday, the 6th of March at 7 p.m, and it will be here at the Berry Theatre. So can I thank you all and wish you a very good evening. Thank you.